Introduction: The Hidden Risk Beneath China's Economic Strength. For many years, China has been admired for successfully avoiding the financial crises that affected other parts of the world, such as the 1997 Asian financial crisis and the 2008 global financial crisis. This track record led some experts to believe that China was uniquely resilient and could avoid the kind of economic meltdowns that have hit other nations. However, the essay argues that this confidence might be misplaced. While China has avoided past crises, doesn't mean it's immune to future ones. In fact, the essay suggests that China might be heading toward a financial crisis caused by internal issues within its political and economic systems. A major concept discussed in the essay is the idea of a soft budget constraint. This means that many state-owned enterprises, local governments, and banks in China operate with the expectation that the central government will always bail them out if they run into trouble. This creates a kind of moral hazard where these entities take on more risk because they believe they will have to face the consequences of failure. The essay warns that this situation is unsustainable. If one part of the system fails, it could create a domino effect that the central government might not be able to control, especially if public and investor confidence is shaken. I'll pause here for a moment. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next section.
Let's keep going.
Great. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, literature review. Is China really immune to crisis? In this section, the essay explores different viewpoints on whether China is truly shielded from financial crises. There are generally two schools of thought. One, the decoupling argument. Some experts believe that China's economy is largely independent of global financial systems. They argue that China's control over its capital, its ownership of major banks, and its vast foreign exchange reserves protect it from the kind of volatility that affects other countries. The entanglement argument: others argue that China is deeply connected to the global economy. For example, China's massive exports and investment in U.S. Treasury bonds played a significant role in shaping global financial trends. In fact, some economists believe that China's policies contributed to the conditions that led to the 2008 financial crisis by keeping interest rates low and fueling asset bubbles. The essay points out that while China seemed to weather the 2008 crisis by injecting large amounts of money into its economy, this approach may have actually masked deeper problems rather than solving them. Let me know if you'd like to continue to the next part.
Yes.
All right. Let's move on to the next section. Debt and demographics: the structural challenges facing China. As the essay continues, it highlights some of the significant structural issues that China is facing. One of the biggest concerns is the country's growing debt. Over the past decade, China's total debt, which includes government, corporate, and household debt, has risen dramatically. Much of this debt is concentrated against state-owned enterprises and local governments, which rely heavily on borrowing to finance infrastructure projects and other investments. Another major issue is China's demographic challenge. The population is aging rapidly due to decades of the one-child policy, and the workforce is shrinking. This puts pressure on the economy because fewer workers are supporting a growing number of retirees. It also means that the country's economic growth is likely to slow down in the future. These structural issues, high levels of debt and an aging population, are deeply interconnected. As economic growth slows, it becomes harder for the government and businesses to pay off their debts, increasing the risk of financial instability. Let me know if you'd like to continue to the next part.
Yes.
Great. Let's continue. Soft budget constraint: the core of the problem. One of the central themes of the essay is the concept of the soft budget constraint. This idea refers to the fact that many state-owned enterprises, SOEs, local governments, and even banks in China operate with the expectation that if they run into financial trouble, the central government will step in and bail them out. This safety net means that these entities are less disciplined about managing their finances and are more willing to take on risky projects and loans. This situation creates a cycle of dependency where SOEs and local governments continue to borrow and spend beyond their means, knowing that the central government will cover their losses. This not only leads to inefficiency and waste, but also increases the overall debt burden on the country. The essay argues that this soft budget constraint is at the heart of China's financial vulnerabilities. Without real accountability and the possibility of failure, there's little incentive for these entities to improve their financial practices or become more efficient. Let me know if you're ready to move on to the next section.
Yes.
Awesome. Let's keep going. Lack of credible institutions. The institutional void, a key point the essay makes is that China lacks what economists call credible institutions. These are the systems and rules that ensure transparency, accountability, and trust in the financial system. In many Western economies, for example, independent central banks, transparent fiscal policies, and legal systems that enforce contracts all help create a stable economic environment. In China, however, the financial system is heavily influenced by the central government and the Communist Party. This means that decisions are often driven by political considerations rather than purely economic ones. The essay argues that this lack of independent, credible institutions makes the financial system more vulnerable to crisis. Without strong checks and balances, it's harder to build trust and stability in the market. Let me know when you're ready to continue with the next section.
Yes.
Great. Let's move forward. Shadow banking and social security. Hidden risks. The essay also dives into the issue of shadow banking, which refers to financial activities that happen outside the traditional banking system. In China, shadow banking has grown rapidly as a way for businesses and local governments to get around regulations and access more funding. While this has provided flexibility, it has also introduced new risks. Shadow banking is less regulated and more opaque, making it harder to track where money is flowing and increasing the potential for financial instability. Another concern is China's social security system, particularly the funding of pensions and healthcare for the aging population. The essay points out that there are significant gaps in the social security system, with many local governments struggling to meet their obligations. This creates another layer of financial risk, as the government may need to step in to cover shortfalls, adding to the overall debt burden. Let me know when you're ready to move on to the next section.
Yes.
Great. Let's continue. Xi Jinping's centralization of power. Political risks to the economy. The essay also discusses the role of political decisions in shaping China's economic landscape, particularly under the leadership of Xi Jinping. Since coming to power, Xi has focused on consolidating control, strengthening the role of the Communist Party, and expanding the influence of state-owned enterprises. While these moves are intended to create stability and ensure that the government can steer the economy, they can also lead to inefficiencies and reduce the role of market forces. Xi's emphasis on political control can sometimes result in economic policies that prioritize short-term political goals over long-term economic health. For example, the government may push banks to lend to certain industries or regions for political reasons, even if those loans are not economically sound. This can add to the financial risks and contribute to the soft budget constraint problem mentioned earlier. Let me know when you're ready for the next section.
Yes.
All right, let's continue. Conclusion: the path forward and the need for institutional reform. In its conclusion, the essay underscores that the real risk to China's economy is not just about debt levels or financial practices. It's about the underlying institutions and the need for genuine reform. The essay argues that without significant changes to create more credible, transparent, and independent institutions, the vulnerabilities in China's financial system will remain. The author suggests that China needs to move toward a system where market forces play a bigger role, where financial institutions operate with more accountability, and where there is less reliance on government bailouts. This would help reduce the moral hazard created by the soft budget constraint and encourage more responsible financial behavior. In essence, the essay calls for a shift from a system that relies heavily on government intervention to one that builds trust through strong, independent institutions. This, the author believes, is the key to ensuring long-term financial stability and preventing a future financial crisis. Let me know if you'd like to dive deeper into any specific part, or if there's anything else I can help with.
What are the pros and cons?
That's a great question. Let's break down some of the pros and cons of the current system and the proposed reforms discussed in the essay. Pros of the current system: stability through control. The central government's strong control can help maintain stability, especially during times of global uncertainty. This control allows the government to quickly implement policies and direct resources where they're needed. Rapid economic development. This system has supported China's rapid economic growth over the past few decades, allowing the country to become a global economic powerhouse. Crisis management, the ability of the central government to step in and provide bailouts, can prevent short-term crises from spiraling out of control and provide a safety net for key industries. Cons of the current system: moral hazard. The expectation of government bailouts can encourage risky behavior among state-owned enterprises and local governments, leading to inefficiencies and increasing the overall debt burden. Lack of transparency. The close ties between the government and financial institutions can lead to a lack of transparency and accountability, making it harder to identify and address underlying problems. Economic distortions. Politically driven decisions can sometimes lead to misallocation of resources, where investments are made for political reasons rather than economic ones.
All right. I would say 75% of all that was just gerbish. All right, let's get straight on down into it. Let's talk about it. This is, obviously one part of what people believe going on in China. Now, I think that a key question that we all need to ask is, when could these events technically occur? Now, obviously, we can be, looking into the future, but there has to be some sort of a way that we can predict overall in trends and areas and dates where this could most likely happen, and we wouldn't be surprised, especially within demographics.
Absolutely. Predicting when such financial events might occur is complex, but there are definitely indicators and trends that analysts watch closely. For example, demographic changes like an aging population and declining birth rates can put pressure on economic growth and social security systems. Debt levels, especially if they continue to rise, can also be a red flag. Analysts often look at economic indicators like GDP growth rates, debt to GDP ratios, and housing market trends to gauge the overall health of the economy. Stress tests on banks and other financial institutions can also help predict potential vulnerabilities. While it's impossible to pinpoint an exact date, watching these trends can give us a sense of when the economy might be heading toward a tipping point. It's all about staying informed.
All right, thank you so much.